Hello everybody, welcome to another episode of Wise Words Wednesday, the podcast series. Thank you so much for joining me. This is episode 20, What Happens When We Die? So, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate you, and I'm so grateful to have you here. My name is Holly from Holly's Holistic Healing, and I am a holistic healer, modern day mystic, spiritual development coach, and spiritual medium. Ultimately, I aspire to inspire others to live happier, healthier, and more spiritual lives. I believe that a huge part of my mission is to help bring spirituality out into the light of day and help it become less of a taboo subject and help it to become more understood and brought up in day-to-day conversation without people being worried about how that will be received. I think, we are at the dawn of a new age here on earth. We are going through a massive paradigm shift where the masses are becoming a lot more spiritually conscious, spiritually aware, aware of our nature and the nature of the universe as being, spiritual energy and energetic first. I don't think many people can contest that. Scientists are proving that matter is just energy, and it is becoming a lot more normal for people to discuss things like that. So I am bringing the spiritual aspect to these conversations. Now, the reason I picked this as tonight's subject matter is because someone reached out to me and asked for some supportive and comforting words that they could give to a friend, a family member in fact, who is not well and is fearful of what happens. And I guess this is a really common thing for people. Of course, a fear of the unknown and the alternatives to believing in an afterlife are very bleak. And not knowing what you're going to face is also very scary. And I wanted to put some people's minds at rest and also, answer a question that maybe every one of us has really, even if we do have some kind of faith or spiritual belief. This is not something that anyone knows about really, not until we get to the other side. Now, I am a huge movie fanatic. I love films. I watch them compulsively. If there's a film I love, I will watch it over and over and over again. And one of my favourite films of all time is a film called Dogma by Kevin Smith. Now, if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. It's absolutely amazing. Now, basically, a brief summary of what happens in Dogma is that two angels have been kicked out of heaven, and they're really annoyed with God. So, through a loophole in the laws of the universe, they find a way to get back into heaven. And by utilising this loophole, they will cause creation as we know it to become undone. So basically what happens, there's a group of people. There's a lady who is the last descendant of Jesus Christ alive on earth, an apostle who comes back from heaven, and two stoners go on a mission to stop these angels from stopping humanity from existing. And there is a lot of profound wisdom interlinked and interspliced with all of the comedy that unfolds in this film. And Chris Rock's character, when discussing religion and faith with the main character, says that it's better to have ideas. You can change an idea, but changing a belief is trickier. Life should be malleable and progressive. Working from idea to idea permits that, but beliefs anchor you to a certain point and they limit your growth. new ideas can't be generated, and life becomes stagnant. Now, I think that is just so profound, and I think if more people took this approach when it came to their faith, their spirituality, their religious connotations, no, that's not the right word, their religious preferences, then I think the world would be a very different place. People go to war over religious beliefs, whereas if they just had ideas, then I think people would realise that actually we've got a lot more in common with our brothers and sisters of different faiths than we, on the surface may realise. Now, what this concept of beliefs and with this concept of beliefs and ideas in mind, I would like you to keep your mind open while I discuss the ideas that I've gathered together over the last 13 years of dedicated exploration to spirituality, and also a lifetime of exposure to alternative ideas to the mainstream Western notions, we have from our religions and our religious perspectives of what happens in the afterlife and what happens when we die. Now, that could be the notions of heaven and hell, or, for example, the growing notion that when we die, that's it, lights out, game over. Now, I spent 7 years of my childhood in Brunei and Borneo. Now, even though it's a Muslim country, the indigenous people, the Ibans who live in the rainforest, believe that they are supported by the spirits of their ancestors, that they are surrounded by their ancestors all of the time. And during my travels around that part of the world, to Thailand, to places like Kota Kinabalu, and to lots of places where there are, Buddhist communities, I visited people who openly honour their ancestors. There are shrines absolutely everywhere. Ancestor worship is a huge thing. And so from a young age, I was very open to the idea of our ancestors being around us. And that is a notion held by indigenous cultures and communities all over the world, not just in the Far East, but absolutely everywhere. Now, despite being raised as a Christian, the idea of heaven and hell never really sat well with me. And, I thought, if God's love is unconditional, then why does hell exist? And why would God allow us to suffer for all of eternity if we are his children and he loves us? It was something that I never really could get my head around, and no one really answered that question for me. So, I had always believed in God and the power of prayer, and that we were supported by our ancestors. I believed in ghosts. I was fascinated by ghost stories. My mum used to tell us often that growing up, she would see her grandfather stood behind the door at the bottom of the stairs watching over them. And, there was always stories of people seeing an old man sat at the top of the waterfalls that we all used to visit all the time. And, TV and films and so on and so on, people are obsessed with this kind of subject matter. And I remember from a young age as well being exposed to stories about reincarnation and, stories of people remembering their past lives and all that kind of stuff. And so in my mind, there was never any doubt that life carried on after death. And at 19, I stood cooking. I had a job. I worked in a cafe, and I was stood in the kitchen cooking, and I heard a voice as clear as day tell me that I looked just like my mother when I was stood there, and no one was there. And I remember I opened up a conversation with a lady called Mary, who worked at the cafe. It was my mum's cafe, actually, and she had lost a son under tragic circumstances, and it was something that she had obviously looked into a lot, because when we lose someone, often this is what sends us on our journey of exploration to finding out more about this subject. And we talked about it at great length. And then only days later, I met someone who, you know who you are if you're listening, who invited me to an evening at a spiritualist church. And wow, what that opened up for me. Now, that was 13 years ago, and from that day on, you know, my spiritual journey truly began, and it became an absolutely dedicated practice for me. As many of you know, I've discussed this before. I would sit every week for 3, 4, 5 hours with a group of people to develop my mediumship abilities and to learn more about spirituality, and this whole subject of what happens when we die and how to communicate with the souls of those who have passed over through the veil, as they say, people that are no longer in this physical dimension. I had an insatiable hunger for knowledge and for understanding, and over the last 13 years I have met many astounding mediums. I have assisted in many spirit rescues, and as I've already said, I developed as a medium myself. I have experienced many different types of communication from the other side. I have met and communicated with many non-physical entities. I've had a number of out-of-body experiences and visions, astral projections, if you will. I have channeled a lot of information, as well as reading some incredible books. And I've also done a lot of research into the beliefs of ancient and Eastern religions. I have watched many interviews, documentaries from renowned mediums and spiritual teachers, as well as people recounting experiences they've had during near-death experiences and out-of-body experiences, and so on and so forth. So, you know, the research and the practice that I've done to gain this knowledge that I want to share with you tonight has been extensive. A long story to get to that point, but basically I've done a lot to try and get to where I am today with this knowledge that I want to share with you. Now, if this is a subject that you want to know more about, and I'm sure it is, because it's something that we all want to know a little bit more about, then I must tell you about a book that I have read that a dear friend of mine wrote. She goes by the name of Jacqueline Page, and the book is called Beyond Timelight, and it is a book that she has written, channeled the information from spirit and put it to a story, and it is unbelievably informative. It's a great read, and I couldn't put it down, and I really think that it is very beneficial for everybody to read who has got an interest in spirituality, an interest in finding out what happens after we leave our physical bodies, and the influence that non-physical entities can have on our world and are having on our world. And it's really great, and I think any aspiring medium or anyone with an interest in spirituality needs to read it, and I am going to put a link to that in the description of this episode so you can go and get yourself a copy or find out more about it. But it's absolutely phenomenal, and I cannot recommend it enough. So a lot of information can be gained, and clarification as well. Now, obviously, a lot of that information I'm going to share with you tonight, but I can't recommend it highly enough. Now, I just want to quote John Lennon here. Very famously said that he's not afraid of death because he didn't believe in it. He said that it's just like getting out of one car and into another. We are spiritual beings here having a temporary human experience, and we have forgotten our true nature and our memories from before this life. But when we die, we are just going home. Now, I said, I did a lot of my spiritual development in a spiritualist church, which, they fundamentally believe that, as I've said, we are spiritual beings having a temporary physical experience, and that, we can communicate with our loved ones once they leave this earth, once they go over to the other side. So, without further ado, let me get to it. Now, I've heard it said many times that we are souls with bodies, not bodies with souls. So with that idea in mind, we stay in our physical bodies as long as they can hold us and sustain life. And when that is no longer possible, either after an illness or an accident or an incident, then our souls leave our bodies and go home, as it were. Now, what that basically means is that we are no longer confined by the laws of this physical reality, of our physical bodies, of this physical experience. Now, if it has been after an illness, for example, that we are expecting to go, that we know our time is coming to an end, our loved ones in the spirit world will draw close and lead us through the light to heaven, for want of a better word, to the dimensions that we originated. If it is after an accident or an incident, sometimes things can be a bit trickier. Sometimes our consciousness is not always aware that we are no longer physical, and it can take a little bit longer for our souls to realize that we're not of this physical world anymore. And sometimes we can get stuck. Spirit can also choose not to go through into the light, and that's where this area of this world in between worlds, if you like, known as the etheric realm, comes into play. But generally speaking, the majority of the time we are met by our loved ones who take us through to the other side, which is where we are met by our loved ones who have gone before us. And there is, reunions. After we have had that time, we have to sit down and watch through our lives that we've lived. And we have to watch all the things that we've done and choose to take responsibility for the things that we have done, the pain that we have caused others, the difficulties that we have caused others, or not. Whether or not we've learned the lessons that we came here to learn or not. And if we don't take responsibility for what we've done, then that's as far as the journey goes, and we end up being sent back to the etheric realms until we are ready to go home and to repent, as it were, and show remorse for the actions that have caused suffering and pain to others. But when we do accept that responsibility and we go fully through the light to the other side, all our memories of our past lives come flooding back. All of the knowledge that we had before we came into these identities and these physical bodies comes flooding back. And it's like all the lessons we've learned from all our lives comes together, and we assimilate it all. When we are over in the light, over the other side, we don't have to stay there. We can come back and visit our loved ones here still on this earth, and we can draw close to them by stepping back into that etheric realm, and we can influence their thoughts, their behaviours, their mood, their emotions. We can communicate through thought transference, through putting images and memories and thought patterns into these people that we draw close to. And we are able to pick these messages up, and we are able to feel the presence of our loved ones drawn close to us that have gone over the other side. It's just that we are at slightly different frequencies of vibration, so we can be occupying the same space at the same time. Just our three-dimensional reality and the senses that we are used to using, are not fine-tuned enough to perceive them in a physical way. Reincarnation is something that is a very common idea held by a lot of religions over in the Far East. But actually, now, did you know that reincarnation was actually in the Christian Bible up until the 4th century? So it's not just an Eastern concept. It is something that is believed and has been believed for millennia, and it's understood just how it goes. That's how we gain knowledge and grow as souls and spirits. We get told by a lot of people that this world is a playground. It is a classroom for learning and growing and evolving as a spirit. And the reason we come back and choose to come back to a world that is, filled with adversity, that there are, there is a lot of suffering in the world, no matter how you want to sugarcoat it. I'm a firm believer in, you see what you expect to see in this world, and our reality is shaped by our expectations and what have you. And that can only be taken so far. There is a lot of suffering in the world. There is a lot of poverty. There is a lot of inhumanity of man towards his fellow man, and that cannot be denied or dismissed. So the reason we choose to come back and incarnate in this world is to grow and experience all aspects of what it means to be in the physical world. Now, I have had a great many conversations about reincarnation with people from lots of different religions and lots of different spiritual practices, and what I careful about saying belief, but the idea that I have been brought to the understanding of is that we get to choose if we want to reincarnate or not. It's not forced upon us at all, and generally speaking, we tend to wait until all of the people that we knew in our physical life, so all family members that we're connected with, that we might want to draw close to assist on their journeys, we wait until all of those are back over the other side. And and then we can choose to come back or not. Now, I should have probably mentioned before now, But time as we know it is a very three-dimensional reality concept. Like even those people, great scientific minds of today realize that our grasp of time is not actually what we think it is. It is very much a man-made idea, and time does not exist in the same way in the higher dimensions as it does here. So for them, a blink of an eye, a second of time to them could be years for us. And so, when we have got loved ones over the other side, they don't seem to have to wait a long time for those loved ones to go back over. It's a very, very different reality to what we know in our physical reality, and that's why it's so hard really to explain, or for us to even get a real grasp of what it is and how it works, because no matter how much information gets channeled from spirit over the other side, and no matter how much meditation we do on the subject, we are still, our understanding is still limited by our perceptions and our expectations, being a 3D physical being in this 3D physical world. So all of these things, they never can be truly understood until we go over the other side. So death is nothing to be feared. As Gandalf says in Lord of the Rings, death is just the next big adventure. I have the belief that we are creators of our physical experience in this world, and what we visualize manifests into reality. Now, I have come to the understanding that the other side, the higher dimensions that we return to, we're not limited by the restrictions of the physical reality. So we can literally shape our experience as it unfolds in our mind. So if you want to spend your life frolicking in the sun in fields of flowers, then you can do. If the concept of heaven to you is surfing all day every day, or horseback riding, or being near waterfalls, walking in woods, being with your family, being with your loved ones, it could be flying through the sky, viewing the world, viewing other worlds, other planets, other galaxies. When we are not confined by this physical reality, anything is possible. We can achieve anything. So to summarize, first, before we came into this world, we were spiritual beings. And when we leave this world, we go back to that state that we have come from. We are with our loved ones who have gone before us, but we can come back to draw close to those who are still in this world here and now. And we can communicate with our loved ones that are in the spirit world through prayer, through focusing our thoughts on them, and they ultimately and absolutely do draw close to us. A medium explained to me once, a very good friend, a very important person in my life, before he passed away, he said to me that it's like picking up a telephone, sending out thoughts to our loved ones in spirit. It's like making a phone call. They are aware that we think of them, and then they come back and draw close to us to give us support, love, upliftment, guidance, the healing that we need sometimes in this life. So I hope that answers more questions than it throws back up. I know I mentioned about souls who sometimes don't realize that they're no longer physical, and that is not a permanent state of being either. There are jobs and roles and things in the spirit world just as there are here, and we all take on tasks if we so choose, like coming back to give healing to those who need it, like coming back to influence those in power, like coming back to give healing to Gaia, to Mother Earth. And one of those roles is also coming back as spirit guides, to help mediums, to help us all. We can be guardian angels, but also there are rescue workers who help those spirits that no longer realize they're physical to go through to the light, to the higher dimensions, to the higher vibrational frequencies, to be reunited with their families, and to go through the whole process of returning to source energy and returning to the universal consciousness. And that is where I'm going to bring this episode to a close. I hope that you have found it enjoyable. I hope that you found it enlightening and educational, and that it has answered some questions for you. I hope that it hasn't confused matters at all, and I hope that if you have had any more questions arise from what's been said, then you will please reach out, either by letting me know in the comments below or contacting me through one of my social media accounts, which are at holistic_Holly on Twitter and Instagram, and Holly's Holistic Healing on Facebook. I also have a number of Facebook groups, one of which is Dawn of the New Age, where we discuss all things to do with spiritual development and spiritual advancement. And I have another group as well called Cultivating Spirituality. So just come and check my Facebook page out, and links to all of these things are there as well. So whatever it is that you are doing for the rest of the day, I hope you have a fantastic time, and I hope that you are all happy, healthy, and filled with love. Namaste, my friends. God bless.